I just wanted to thank everybody for showing up to our third library session. This will be our last one for the semester, but please stay tuned for the next couple for the next semester for fall, because this is a new initiative that we're going to be testing out. So we will definitely be doing more of this. So if you enjoy this, keep us in the loop so we can figure out some other different ideas of what to do for the fall semester. And if you've missed any of the other ones that maybe you're still interested in viewing, I have recordings of one of the other ones. The second one, we had some tech problems, and unfortunately I was not able to go ahead and get a recording of that, but I do have the PowerPoint copy of that if that's interesting to anybody. I'd be happy to send that over. This session will be recorded, so for anybody who wants a recording of it, please feel free to go ahead and send me your email, and I'd be happy to send that over to you. I will also be putting an attendance link to, once again, so then that way anybody who is new, who just showed up in the last few minutes, if you don't mind signing up for the attendance, especially if you're here for extra credit or your instructor told you to come here. Usually I do have instructors coming in and messaging me and saying, hey, did this student show up? And that would be proof that you attended today. So we are super excited. Thank you so much, Amy and Kim, for doing the third session for us. So they're going to be doing the fake news is a real problem, and why do we need a new set of skills to uncover the truth? They'll be discussing of why it's a problem, why we're susceptible to it, who spreads it, and how we identify it. And more importantly, to learn quick, easy, and effective methods to evaluating online information and make you identify some of this fake news beforehand. So we're excited, and thank you so much, Kim and Amy, if you want to get started.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone to our fake news webinar. We are super excited to be sharing this information with you this afternoon. My name is Amy Fauble, and I'm one of the reference librarians here at MCC, and I'm co-hosting this webinar with Kim Tipton, who's right there. She's also one of the reference librarians at MCC. So today we are going to be talking about, is it fake news or information disorder, and kind of distinguishing between those two different phrases or terms, and then discussing some of the common forms of information disorder, and discussing what are the dangers of fake news. And then we're going to give you some practical techniques for actually identifying fake news. And I know as I was preparing for this and doing the research, and I think this is true with Kim too, I found out so much useful information, and it really has proven relevant and practical, and it has impacted how I interact with information online. And so I hope you guys also find this equally useful too as we go forward. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Great. So, we like this. We like these webinars to be kind of conversational and engaging. Nobody wants to just listen to us talk for 45 minutes. So I'd like to start out with just asking a couple little questions about news and about information in general. So my first one that I think, Amy and I have talked about it, just where are you getting your news these days? Feel free to speak up over your mic or answer in the chat. So where do you get your news today? There's a lot of different places. Any thoughts? We're looking for things like, the TV or newspaper, and even those can be local news or national news. And there's a big difference between those two things and the information and the news that you're getting from those two sources.
So some people are saying Snapchat, podcast, social media. So
okay.
I'd say all different platforms of social media, Facebook, Twitter, all social media is where most younger people get their news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the thing with social media, and we're going to get into this a little bit later on, but there was a Pew Research study that was done that found that people who primarily get their news from social media are more likely to have heard false or unproven claims. So, a lot of that stuff that gets shared on social media, they're coming from people or from sources that we just maybe inherently trust, and we share them, and so then it just kind of perpetuates it. So if we're talking about news that we trust, how do we know the news is trustworthy? Like, what makes you think about a source as trustworthy? Are there any kind of identifying factors that you look for, or just how do you trust, or why do you trust the sources that you use for your information? Any thoughts? You know, it used to be, you know, back in the day, we had talked about this in another webinar we did. It used to be back in the day, we had our news anchors, or these just kind of journalists that we just kind of inherently trusted. They were popular. The news, I think, was more trusted then. And it's kind of hard to know who to trust these days. You know, there's so much misinformation, and now so much media has so much bias. You know, it's going to be slanted one way or the other politically, and whether that aligns with our beliefs or not, you know, is going to influence whether we trust it or not, right? So just one more question. Has anybody here encountered fake news, or, you know, maybe you shared something that you thought was true and later on you found out otherwise? Does anybody have a story they'd like to share? I know it's happened to all of us. You know, we've all shared fake news, you know, not on purpose, you know.
I've shared fake news stuff, but I know that like with Facebook, like my mom, who's in her 60s, she doesn't really understand that everything you see on Facebook isn't true. So we have to show her other sites where, no, Mom, that's not accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not everything you see on Facebook is true.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. Yeah. You know, I think there's a certain, you know, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but, you know, I think there are some people who are just completely cynical now about everything they read, and, you know, they don't believe anything, and that's kind of come out of all of this. You know, they think everything's fake, and so they're not believing anything. And then you've got some other people who just automatically trust the information that they see without investigating it a little bit more. And we're going to talk about that a lot today. So let's talk about the news or the information you might encounter, and what you're actually seeing. So we've all heard the term fake news, and it has become so popular that it was actually added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2019. But according to the OED, it's not actually a new term, even though it feels new, and it actually dates back to 1890. And in its original context, it's likely that it did refer to news that was legitimately fake. But now that term has become a catch-all. And it's a lot of people just use it to refer to content or information that they don't agree with. And I saw one news story that actually used the term weaponized, that the term fake news has become weaponized. So enter an organization called First Draft, and it's a nonprofit founded in 2015, and their mission is to provide information about information. Okay, they educate society about the dangers of spreading false information, and they aim to give us tools to combat that. Okay, they're nonpartisan. They don't accept funding from any political parties, and that information is all very transparent on their website. They put out everything for people to see and know what they do and don't do. So we have Claire Wardle, and she's the co-founder and executive director of their United States offices. She published a document in 2019, and it was called the First Draft's Essential Guide to Understanding Information Disorder. And we link to that at the end. And they discuss the term fake news. And I pulled out a quote here that I just really struck me. And it's on the slide here. And it says, the term fake news doesn't begin to cover all of this. Most of this content isn't even fake. It's often genuine, used out of context. And most of this can't be described as news. It's good old-fashioned rumors, it's memes, it's manipulated videos. Okay. So, and in her document, she says they prefer to call it what it is: propaganda, lies, conspiracies, all these things, and classifies the whole subject as information disorder. And she also explains that those things like propaganda and rumors and things like that, from those things, we get three main categories of information disorder. And she's identified that as what she calls disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. So I'm just going to go over what these three things are and the difference between them. So disinformation is content that's purposely made up and just meant to be destructive. So it's people making things up for the heck of it. And it's usually driven by three factors, according to Claire Wardle. She said money, political influence, or just to stir up trouble for the sake of it. There was I think it was a TikTok video back in December that went around about somebody had said, oh, if you go to Chick-fil-A and you order something and the person at the register doesn't say, oh, it's my pleasure, you would get free food. And a fact check of that found out that it was completely made up. It was a hoax, but that post went viral and it was shared millions of times in a week. And you think about the trouble that caused, was it super harmful or dangerous? No, but it probably aggravated the heck out of the people who worked at those restaurants, okay? Next, we have misinformation, and that's content that's false, which is that disinformation, but the person sharing it doesn't know it's false, and they're sharing it because they actually believe they're helping or potentially protecting somebody by passing it along. These are those viral posts that you'll often see around social media, and it gets share after share, a lot of times because it's a sensitive topic and they want to help others in some way. And Snopes.com actually calls those viral scare lore posts. And there's one example, and because it's not actually helping anybody when that information is false and it gets reshared. And one example of that is in 2018, there was a social media post going around warning women specifically that if you found a zip tie attached to your car's side mirror, that meant that you've been identified as a potential sex trafficking victim. And it was, to alert others, that you could be a victim. But that was found out to be a hoax. And in response to that viral hoax, one police department reminded people not to share unverified information because it creates paranoia as well, and then instead, they'd rather shine a light on legitimate resources from experts on that issue, okay? And that third category we have is malinformation, and that's real information, but it gets shared for the sole purpose of causing damage. And one example of this is when Hillary Clinton's emails were leaked for the sole purpose of damaging her reputation and wreaking havoc on the elections. So to break this down even further, because there are so many levels of this information disorder, Amy's going to explain just some more common forms of information disorder that you'll typically see.
Okay, so yeah, Claire Wardle then breaks it down into 7 forms of information disorder that she's identified. And I'll go through each of these and in some cases provide examples for some of them. So the first one is satire or parody, and this is not intended to be harmful. It's actually mostly intended just to entertain people. And some examples of those are the Babylon Bee and the Onion, if some of you are familiar with those sites. The problem is that sometimes it has a potential to fool people, and even presidents can be fooled. So in an article from US Today that was published last October, it stated that President Donald Trump on Friday morning tweeted a link to an unapologetically fake news website appearing to share the satirical content in earnest. So he actually thought it was true, according to his tweet. So the knowingly fake news story for the Babylon Bee, it has a conservative bent, and it claimed in jest that Twitter was shutting down its platform to prevent the spread of negative news about the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden. So that's one example. And Trump tweeted, wow, this has never been done in history. So it was interesting. But the next one is misleading content. And this is the misleading use of information to frame an issue or individual. So Kim will share a really good example of this later on, but this is basically true content, but it's not being presented objectively or fairly. So it might take a quote or maybe an image or a part of an event or story and frame it in such a way that it does not accurately represent it. So it doesn't give you the whole picture or the truth behind what actually happened. The next one is called imposter content, and that's when genuine sources are impersonated. So there is an example of someone, a tweet that came from somebody named Jack Kimball, claiming to be a congressman from the 54th District of California. First of all, California only has 53 districts. So that would be the first clue. And then second, the account did not have the blue seal with a check mark on it, which is Twitter's seal for a verified account. So that was just clearly made up, and he was tweeting information that was kind of incendiary. The next one is fabricated content. So this is new content is 100% false and is just designed to deceive or do harm. So an example of this is a newspaper called the Denver Guardian. It's a fake newspaper that was created. It claimed to be the oldest newspaper, although it was registered in 2016. And it published a popular but untrue story about Hillary Clinton on its site 3 days before the 2016 election. So the story was shared on Facebook more than 500,000 times and earned more than 15.5 million impressions. So it's hard to say whether that had any impact or not on the election results. It could have possibly, we don't really know. Another one of the 7 forms of information disorder is false connection. So this is when the headlines or captions don't support the content. So this makes me kind of think of like clickbait, when you like ever clicked on something and you think that it's going to link to something, a certain story, and when you actually go to that site, it's not really connected, like it doesn't pan out to be what you thought it was going to be. So there's a lot of revenue getting people to go to sites. So they draw us in with catchy headlines or trying to get us to click on it, but then it doesn't really deliver the content they promised. So the next one is false context. And this is when genuine content is shared with false contextual information. So an example of this is there was a tweet shared after the Manchester explosion at the Ariana Grande concert. And the tweet included a photo of Ariana Grande covered in blood. And it made us think that it happened as a result of that Manchester explosion. But in reality, the photo was several years old, and it was Ariana Grande with stage makeup on, actually, from the set of Scream. So it wasn't equally, both of the things were true. There was an explosion, and the photo did happen, but they were not connected. The last one is manipulated content. And this is when genuine information or imagery is manipulated to deceive. So last summer, there was a video of Nancy Pelosi, and social media trolls slowed it down to make it appear that she was drunk and slurring her words, which was not true. They just manipulated the video to make it appear so. So those are some of the examples of information disorder that you might come across as you see stuff posted on social media or in other places that you encounter news or information. So we're going to go on to the next slide, which kind of gets into what is the danger of fake news? Like, does this really matter? Who cares? Or what is the harm of this? So fake news is harmful because it creates mistrust of all information. And we need trustworthy information to make decisions that can have a real impact on ourselves, on our families, our friends, communities, society as a whole. So it's like the story of the boy who cried wolf. Like when you're faced with such an overwhelming amount of questionable information, it's really hard to spot the trustworthy sources then when we see them. We don't know always. It's hard to identify. We no longer know what to believe, and this can lead to cynicism and also feelings of helplessness. So Project Information Literacy is a nonprofit research institute that studies what it's like to be a student in the digital age. And they have published a number of reports that illustrate the rise of cynicism among college students. So one of their findings, they studied 6,000 students at 11 US colleges, and they found that 82% of the students said that news is necessary in a democracy. 72% get their news from social media on a daily basis. So as we were talking about earlier, where do you guys get your news from? And a lot of you said social media, and that is very common. So that is in line with that. 68% said that the sheer amount of news to them was overwhelming, because we do have so many more news sources. Like we were talking about how we used to just have like certain news stations that we would look at when we were younger. And that's not always the case anymore. There's just so much information available now. 45% said they found it was difficult to tell real news from fake news. And then 36% said that fake news made them distrust the credibility of any news. So they said deep political polarization has made students suspicious of biased reporting. And then students were also highly critical of an increasing avalanche of news that they thought appealed to their emotions rather than conveying facts. So information cynicism was then explored more deeply in another report in 2020, and they interviewed a group of faculty and college students at 8 different US colleges, and they did a report. It's called Information Literacy in the Age of Algorithms. And this study found that students were cynical almost to the point of believing that their concerns and actions had little meaning, that it was not possible to change things. So like they didn't have an impact. Whatever they did does not have an impact. So an important theme was that no news source could be trusted at face value. And there was a pervasive belief among students that they should rely on themselves to decide what to believe. And this is upsetting or scary because I don't think anybody can be an expert in all things. So if you don't trust anyone, like how do you make good informed decisions then? So some of the other concerns about fake news is the radicalization of individuals based on algorithms that create filter bubbles or echo chambers. So algorithms collect data on us and use the data to determine what we see online. So they tailor the information that you get when you search to you specifically. So you can be kind of caught in this confirmation bias where you're only seeing things that you already believe or you already believe to be true. So it's only always constantly like exposing us to one side of an issue. And an example of this is Dylann Roof, who on June 17th, 2015, murdered 9 African Americans in a church in Charleston. And there's an excellent video by the Southern Poverty Law Center on how he became radicalized by what he found online to believe false statistics relating to Black on white crime. Even scholarly sources can sometimes be fake. And an example of this is a study published in a reputable medical journal called The Lancet. So The Lancet implied a link between autism and vaccines, but it was later redacted. And it was found that the author actually like carefully studied and selected children for his research. And some of the funding was by lawyers acting for parents who were involved in lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers. So unfortunately, though, this study created like lasting mistrust in vaccines, and many parents chose not to vaccinate their children as a result. So, and some also believe that fake news can actually like threaten our democracy. So according to a CQ researcher article on cyber warfare, Russia, as well as 6 other countries, use online campaigns to influence public thought outside of their borders. So Russia has used fake Facebook accounts to spread false and divisive information. So they also state that Russia views its information operations, or what they call cognitive warfare, as more effective than conventional weapons. So countries such as the United States that are founded on principles of free speech can be particularly vulnerable. They're kind of creating chaos and mistrust of ourselves, like with each other, and causing polarization in our country and distracting us kind of from what the real enemy is and the real danger. So what can we do to combat this information disorder? So we have to teach simple, practical, and effective techniques that you can use to evaluate information that you interact with almost on a daily, constant basis. So we want to empower you with these techniques so that you can find the sources you trust and feel confident in the information you are consuming. So the next part of the webinar will do just that.
So checklists are just not enough anymore. They were initially designed for print resources, and they're still a really good place to start, but because we still need to consider things like expertise of the author and the currency of the information. But most of the information that we encounter is on the open internet. And as we've seen, there is so much false information out there. And so we need to carefully evaluate it using some different methods before sharing it or believing it. That's where the Sift method comes in. And Sift is an acronym for stop, investigate the source or claim, find better coverage, and trace it back to the original context. This is a method that was developed by a man named Mike Caulfield. He's the director of blended and networked learning at Washington State University in Vancouver. So instead of only checking surface level criteria This method says we should be opening up new tabs, cross-checking the information, comparing it what we find with other sources. It calls on us to take some kind of action on the content, okay? So let's talk about each of these steps in a little more detail. So the first step is literally just stop. We need to get comfortable with like leaning into skepticism a little bit. And if we're cynical, just maybe try to just be a little more skeptical, skeptical. Oh my gosh. So when you encounter information, pause for just a moment before you share it or accept it as true, and just ask yourself a couple of questions. What is the source and who's behind the information? The source could be, either the author of the content and or the person who even shared it with you. We all have people in our circles who we inherently trust, like family or friends. But as we've seen, everyone is susceptible to misinformation. So in thinking about who's behind the information, ask yourself, what do you know about the website or the organization? Are they reputable? What do others have to say about them? And the next 3 steps explain how to do that.
Okay, so the next step in the Sift method is called investigate the source or claim. So in this step, you want to ask yourself if you're looking more at a source or a claim or both. So determine first what you're going to investigate, and then you want to look at what other sources say. So when you come across information online that was shared with you, or else you just come across it on your own, how do you find out if it's true? So as Kim said, in the past, we taught students to evaluate information by looking at a source using a checklist of criteria. And some of you might be familiar with these, like the CRAP was one of them. It's a popular checklist that people have used before. It looks at things like currency, scope, authority. Unfortunately, we've realized that even with these checklists, poor sources can slip through the cracks. And the checklists were sometimes time consuming and could produce conflicting results. So in the meantime, also, the online environment has evolved, making it harder and harder to find the flowers for the weeds in the field of information out there. So it's very easy nowadays for people to create professional looking, albeit fake sources, to impersonate someone, to manipulate information, or to commercialize information. And even really smart people can be fooled. So there is a famous study that was conducted with Stanford students, professional historians, and professional fact checkers. And that is a real job, a professional fact checker. So they were asked to evaluate 2 very similar looking pediatric websites and determine which one was better. So the Stanford students and the historians performed really poorly at this task. So the fact checkers, though, were right 100% of the time, and they actually were able to complete the task a lot faster. So they watched the fact checkers to see how they searched and compared it with the other 2 groups. So while the historians and the Stanford students pretty much like opened a website and they would just like read the website top to bottom vertically, the fact checkers almost immediately like left that website and they opened up new tabs and they began to read laterally. And this is key. So when you come across a source or a claim and you don't know if you can trust it, there's some simple techniques you can use. So if it's a source, and by this I mean like a person maybe, or a business or an organization, or maybe it's a periodical like a newspaper or something that you're not familiar with, do a search in Wikipedia and tack, like put in the name of the source, and then at the end of it, tack the word Wikipedia to your search. And I know you're probably like, oh my gosh, a librarian is telling me to use Wikipedia. Like, what's going on here? Because you've been told your whole life not to use Wikipedia. But there is a right and wrong way to use Wikipedia. So, and when it does have its benefits and uses when used correctly. So for example, let's say you came across an article from the Ohio Star and you're not familiar with the Ohio Star, okay? So you open up Google and you type Ohio Star newspaper Wikipedia, and you see that it doesn't have a Wikipedia page, which might be kind of strange for like a newspaper. So further down the list of results, you see a link to the Ohio Star. And the byline says, most reliable newspaper across Ohio. Ohio Star provides unbiased updates on investigative reports, thoughtful opinions, sports, lifestyle. That sounds pretty good, but it's from their own site. So you want to see what other sites have to say about them. So you look further down the list and you see a result from Snopes, a known fact-checking website. So this kind of should raise a red flag, like, okay, why does it come up with a fact-checking site when I do this search? So you click on it, and then to find something quickly in a page, you hit Control F, and you can type in Ohio Star, and it will jump in the page where it's mentioned. So you do that, and you see that it is one of several newspapers that were created by this Star News Digital Media. And you read and find out that they were actually created by Tea Party activists prior to the election, and some of their funding came from PACs. And so as the Snopes article states, it says the issue is not the creation of conservative content. The issue, according to Kathleen Bartson-Culver, the director for the Center of Journalism Ethics at the University of Wisconsin Madison School of Journalism and Mass Communication, is disguising conservative activism as journalism. So the article also states that across the political spectrum, according to a 2017 Pew Research article, local news is considered more trustworthy than other more national news sources. So it's kind of especially sneaky that they chose this method to push their agenda. So mentioning fact-checking websites, maybe you haven't heard of these before, but they are very useful resources that you should have in your fact-checking toolkit. So this slide actually lists several of those. So you can use these to check a claim. Like, for example, if you come across a claim that says like, oh, zinc shortens COVID, like you should take zinc because it'll shorten the life of COVID if you get COVID. So you go to Google and you search zinc COVID, and then to search in a particular site, you do site:/snopes.com, and it will only search within that site then. So if you can't find it on a fact-checking site though, you could just search Google in general. You could do a search like this. So like say you come across a claim on whether cooking olive oil over high heat is dangerous and produces toxic fumes. So you would type in olive oil and high heat. And if you notice, I didn't say put in the words toxic or dangerous or any of that in your search because you don't want to bias your search results. So then when you look up the different results that come up to search your claim, you might have to actually then kind of backtrack a little bit too and look at the sources and investigate whether those are reliable or not as well. So that might be a two-step process. Like first you're checking out to see if the claim is true, and then you have to look at the sources that you're looking at to see if they're actually like good sources of information. Okay. Some of the other techniques you can use is Google Scholar. Some of you might be familiar with. So if someone claims to be an expert in a topic, like let's say they say they're an expert in climate change or on COVID vaccines, if you search their name in Google Scholar, you can see if they've published or written anything else on that topic. So if they're an expert, they should have written other things about that topic. Another technique is to use Google News. So if there's a claim or a story, and if it's true, it should be covered in a lot of different news sources. So look it up and see if it is. And then if you're getting some information from Twitter, and I have to be honest, I don't really use Twitter. I don't have a Twitter account, but supposedly if you hover over the name with your mouse on Twitter, it'll have like show whether it's a verified account or not by having a little blue check mark or the little blue seal of approval for certain accounts. And it also tells you who owns this account or who is this account, supposedly, who's behind it. So some other clues to look at for Twitter is like the start date. If it's a brand new account, that's kind of a red flag. Older accounts tend to be generally more reliable. Look at who are the followers, like how many followers, does it match what you'd expect? For example, if it was somebody claiming to be a congressman, like in the other example I gave you, and they only have 5 followers, that's kind of a red flag. Do you know any of the people who are following the account? And then look at their previous tweets, and are they in line with what you'd expect? Like, if somebody's in a professional position, are they tweeting things that sound like something that you would expect from that type of person? So those are some other things to look for. But these fact-checking sites are really great ones to be aware of. So Snopes, is like probably the oldest one. I think it's about 27 years old, and it was actually started to like debunk urban legends, but now it covers pretty much all different topic areas. PolitiFact is mostly like what it says is political sources. And then Quackwatch is for medical information. So these are all great resources to have on hand that you can use. And if you're searching something and you want to know, sometimes if you're searching the web or claim, just after it, just type the words fact check. That's also a really useful thing to do. And then it might link to some of these different sources automatically when you type in like whatever your keywords are and just put fact check right after it. So those are all great techniques for investigating a source or a claim.
So the third step in our 4-step process here is about finding better coverage and determining if it's the best source for your information needs. So when you did your fact checking in the previous step, did you find consensus among multiple sources? Legitimate information should be covered by many sources and treated similarly without extreme bias. Other coverage might be more in-depth, more reputable, more varied. For example, if you see something, say in a popular magazine about side effects of a vaccine, you might look for more trusted coverage, either maybe from the CDC or your local health department. And when you search Google, you really want to look beyond those first few results. A lot of those first few results can be sponsored content or ads, and companies will pay for their results to float up to the top, and that doesn't mean they're the best results. There's a commercial on TV right now, and I cringe every time I see it. It's for an online life insurance company, and there's a woman in the commercial, and she says, "Oh, I literally searched best online life insurance company, and this came up." And like, no, just because they were right up there, you know, they may be paid for their name to be at the top and get you to click on them and buy their insurance. So really beware of those that sponsored content or those ads up there. Like Amy was saying, if you find a lengthy document, you need to find something quickly, confirm something, you can use Control F on your keyboard and you can search within that document. And if you're looking for better coverage or you're not sure of your source, you may need to go back a step. You know, so if you encounter a new source that you're not familiar with, go back a step and investigate that source. That's part of like what Amy was saying, that lateral reading, opening up new tabs and kind of doing what the fact checkers do and go down that rabbit hole of research a little bit and, you know, just go back a step. And the final step in our process here is tracing the claim back to the original context. Or can you find the original source? Has it been accurately represented? Good information should link to or cite their source, or at the very least mention it by name, but it's not uncommon to see a news article that says sources say, or according to a recent report, not tell us who those sources are or what that report is. If they do refer to a source that they're using, see if you can find it. If they link to it, click on it and look at that source then. Try to find the original study or the report. One example of this is an article that came out from a popular website called The Verge, and they were reporting on Amazon and ebooks and working with libraries and so on. And they state right at the beginning of their story that they are commenting on a report that originally appeared in the Washington Post. Go to that report in the Washington Post, and then, you know, once you find that original source, was it accurately represented? Was it reported on fairly? How is the information structured? Look at the author's word choice. That can all affect your perception of a piece of information. Do you have the entire story? Was anything left out? This is, again, common for news that appears on social media. And kind of, again, referring back to what Amy said earlier, that confirmation bias, what you see in your search results might be different than what your friend sees. And, you know, it's all based on other things that you've interacted with. So you may be getting different news or different parts of the news than somebody else. You also need to think about if something was left out, was it misquoted? Was it misrepresented? It's so easy to take something out of context. and make it appear, kind of manipulate it and make it appear as something else. And one example of that was in October of 2020, Donald Trump placed a quote from Dr. Fauci in one of his campaign ads, and the ad was meant to highlight Trump's response to the pandemic. And in that campaign ad, they show Dr. Fauci saying in a video, they said, "I can't imagine anybody could be doing more." And the implication of using that statement in the ad was that Fauci was commending Trump for his actions. But in reality, he took that quote out of context from Dr. Fauci, and his statement was actually referring to the White House coronavirus task force overall and the general efforts of the entire federal government, rather than just Donald Trump. So even images, like Amy was saying earlier with the image from the Ariana Grande concert, even those images can be taken out of context as well, or even altered, and it can be really hard to tell. And that's where doing a Google reverse image search, or another website that does that is called TinEye, and I've used it myself. And if there's an image out there that matches it, it'll find it and it will tell you the original source of that image. Sometimes it may even be a stock photo, and it'll tell you, a stock photo from Getty Images or something. So that can give you some context as well for that story. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is I found a news story just today that we want to put this Sift method into practice and show you, even though it took a bit for us to explain these steps, we want to show that actually doing them does not take a very long time, and it's actually very effective. So you'll bear with me for just a second. I'm going to go over to the news article from today. So are you all seeing an article from Yahoo News? Are you seeing that? Okay, thank you. So let's look at this article and learn a little bit more about it. So, you're scrolling through news headlines, looking at Yahoo News, and you're just scrolling through headlines. And this one caught my eye, and I see the headline. It says, "Biden plan will raise taxes on the middle class." And so I clicked on it, and I wanted to see what this was about. Okay, so then I start reading this, and all these red flags started going up. So let's take the first step, and that's where we're going to stop. And what can we find out about the source or the author? Okay, so if we look here, up here in very small print, up at the top, it says National Review. And so I immediately looked up to see what kind of publication this was. And this is a good example of how Yahoo has repurposed a news story from another source. National Review is another news source, and doing some research on that, I found that it definitely has a right-wing political bias. So first I learned that about it, and then the next step is I thought, okay, who's the author of this? And sometimes when you find an article online, their names might be linked and you can click on it. There might be a bio. This is not the case here. So I opened a new tab. I searched his name in there. And I learned that I found a bio on the National Review website. And it says he's a tax litigation specialist and the author of 15 books. And then just doing a general Google search of his name, I also learned that he's the executive director of what's called the Tax Freedom Institute. Well, guess what? I opened up another tab and said, what is this Tax Freedom Institute? And in learning about that, I also learned that that company is also known by the name, the Taxpayers Defense Institute. So I opened up another tab and said, okay, what's this business about? So these are all like these little nuggets of research that we can do just to learn a little bit more about who this author is, okay? I'm not looking for just, is he an expert, yes or no? We want to look beyond that and learn a little bit more about him. Like Amy was saying, what else has he written? What organizations is he affiliated with? So once I learned about the name of, the National Review, and I learned about the author himself, then I set out to read the article. And it's kind of a longer article, and it's you can look at it if you'd like later. It's in our sources at the end. But what caught me was the headline itself was a little misleading, because if you read this the way it's worded, he will raise taxes. It seems definitive, right? And as you read through this, first we learn that it's actually about his plans, potential plans. It's not even for sure. Plans having to do with capital gains taxes and investment in real estate taxes and things like that. So it's a very specific type of tax, not just, hey, he's going to raise taxes, which is how that headline makes it appear. And then as I'm reading through the article, I see words like if and will likely and you can expect and we cannot be sure and desperate and spending spree. And now I'm thinking, okay, there's some sort of extreme language. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of opinion in here. So overall, what I've determined is that this is likely an opinion piece with some right-wing bias, okay? Because we determined that that's what type of news source National Review is. So then the next step would be to investigate the article's claim. And his claim comes here in this second sentence. His claim is that Biden is going to repeal the Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed during the Trump administration. So now I'm going to investigate that. Again, I'm going to open up another tab and I'm going to do that search. And a simple Google search using the words Biden Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And I found a number of sources. I also did a search that just said Biden capital gains, and I found some sources with that as well. And in fact, we were talking about not like going beyond just those first few Google results. I went to the second page of Google results, which I think hardly anybody does. And I found a PolitiFact article that fact checked this, this, I don't know, allegation, I'll call it, that he's going to be doing this with the taxes. And they had something to say about that. So now, you know, like Amy was saying too, do that same search, but just add fact check right away at the beginning. So I redid that search and I typed in Biden capital gains fact check, and guess what? The whole first page of results was results with fact checks on this claim from various sources. So it was really eye-opening. And the last step for this would be to find better coverage. So see, you know, we were saying this seems to be a very, you know, right-wing biased opinion piece about this. So see if you can find less biased or more neutral information on Biden's tax plans, or can you find other viewpoints that are maybe leaning more left-wing? And then you can just search Biden's tax plans, and by typing in bidentaxplan.gov, and that telling it in the search to for .gov is going to tell it to search just government websites. So that way, you know, you're getting, you know, right from the source. You're not getting news. You're not getting somebody's opinion. You're going right to the source of the information. Okay. So, you know, putting into practice, you know, I researched the news source. I researched the author, looked for certain words throughout, and then look to see what else I can find about it. So it, you know, you don't have to go down a half-hour rabbit hole of research. I think start to finish, it took 5 or 10 minutes. So it's really not a lengthy process. It's just a different way to look at it. Okay.
I think too, as you practice it more and more, it becomes quicker and more just like a habit that you naturally just, I found that since doing this and preparing for this, it has become more of a habit. When I come across something, I'll quickly just, you know, look up that source in Wikipedia, or quickly just type in the claim on Google and hit fact check after it and see what comes up. And it does. Sometimes you can like find out in like just a couple minutes whether it seems like a legitimate source or claim or not. So it doesn't have to be some huge like unruly process that you're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 4 quick moves. And if you just get to know that acronym, and even just that first one, even just stop for a second. Don't just automatically hit that share button. You know, what can you find out about it first? You know? Yeah.
So if anybody has questions, oh, sorry, Kim.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, if any questions at all. You know, it's new information, it's new ways to think about things, but like I said, this is, just asking us to kind of act on the information a little bit before we automatically share it. So we've got some information here, just if you want to read a little bit more about it. We've got the, so that guide that I talked about at the beginning, the Essential Guide to Understanding Information Disorder, there's a link there. We also have a link to the original website where Michael Caulfield it described in great detail the Sift method, and then also his book, Web Literacy for Student Fact Checkers. This is an open access textbook that you can link to as well. And I'm going to put in the chat, we have a research guide with all of our webinar slides. So I'm going to put that in the chat as well. So if you want to look at our slides later or any of the other webinars that we've done, that will be available for you as well. So let me go to the chat and drop this guy in there. Whoops. Let's do that. That's not working here. Let's try this again. All right. Okay, so that research guide is in the chat now. So if you want to access our slides later on. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop screen sharing now. It didn't seem like anybody had any questions for us. Nope. All right. Well, I'm really appreciative that we could have this opportunity. So thanks for letting us talk about this today.
Great presentation. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you, students, for coming. Appreciate it. You all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.